It is better to try something and fail than to try nothing and succeed. The result may be the same, but you won't be. We always grow more through defeats than victories. What if everything in the world were a misunderstanding? What if laughter were really tears? The most painful state of being is remembering the future, particularly the one you'll never have. To dare, to lose one's footing momentarily. Not to dare is to lose oneself. There are two ways to be fooled. One is to believe what isn't true. The other is to refuse to believe what is true. Take a chance, and you may lose. Take not a chance, and you have lost already. The truth is a trap. You cannot get it without it getting you. You cannot get the truth by capturing it, only by its capturing you. A no does not hide anything, but a yes very easily becomes a deception. Take away the paradox from the thinker, and you have a professor. Confidence is the present tense of hope. The question is not to be or not to be. It is what we should be until we are not. The tyrant dies and his rule is over. The martyr dies and his rule begins. It is not the path which is the difficulty. Rather, it is the difficulty which is the path. For that is what changes what you are. Boredom is the root of all evil, the despairing refusal to be oneself. Life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. Wherever there is a crowd, there is untruth. The self-assured believer is a greater sinner in the eyes of God than the troubled disbeliever. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. The door to happiness opens outward. On the secretly blushing cheek is reflected the glow of the heart. Why bother remembering a past that cannot be made into a present? For without risk there is no faith, and the greater the risk, the greater the faith. It is impossible to exist without passion. Man always hopes for what he should remember, and forever remembers what he should hope for. It is very important in life to know when your cue comes. The thing that cowardice fears most is decision. People demand freedom of speech as a compensation for the freedom of thought, which they seldom use. The unhappy person is never present to themselves because they always live in the past or the future. Our life always expresses the result of our dominant thoughts. It is so hard to believe because it is so hard to obey. People understand me so poorly that they don't even understand my complaint about them not understanding me. Life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. The most common form of despair is not being who you are. Do it or don't do it. You will regret both. Knowledge is a wealth that cannot be stolen. Once you label me, you negate me. Many of us pursue pleasure with such breathless haste that we hurry past it. Leap of faith. Yes, but only after reflection. Happiness is the greatest hiding place for despair. My sorrow is my castle. We were given the commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. But if this commandment is correctly understood, then you can read in it the opposite statement. You must love yourself properly. Most people are subjective toward themselves and objective toward all others. Frightfully objective sometimes, but the task is precisely to be objective toward oneself and subjective toward all others. The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived. To be a woman is something so strange, so confusing, and so complicated that only a woman could put up with it. Truth always rests with the minority, and the minority is always stronger than the majority, because the minority is generally formed by those who really have an opinion, while the strength of a majority is illusory. In order to help another effectively, you must understand what he understands. Instruction begins when you put yourself in his place so that you may understand what he understands, and in the way he understands it. Once you are born in this world, you're old enough to die. The more silent you are, the more you are able to hear. Hope is a passion for the possible. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. Cultivate the will. This is the armor that preserves the mind. What distinguishes all love from lust is the fact that it bears an impression of eternity. The best response to criticism is to smile and forget. Life has its own hidden forces, which you can only discover by living. For it is not what happens to me that makes me great, but it is what I do. Life has become a bitter drink to me, and yet it must be taken in drops, counted one by one. I opened my eyes and saw the real world, and I began to laugh, and I haven't stopped since. Faith begins precisely where thinking leaves off. The function of prayer is not to influence God, but rather to change the nature of the one who prays. The highest, after all, is not to comprehend the highest, but to do it. Learn not to tell anything to anyone, because only then your life will definitely get better. Therefore, do not deceive yourself. Of all deceivers, fear most yourself. Our life is a game of whose rules we don't know. Sleeping is the height of genius. If you don't have many friends, that means you have a lot of life experience. The more people who believe something, the more apt it is to be wrong. The person who's right often has to stand alone. If you want to be loathsome to God, just run with the herd. People settle for a level of despair they can tolerate and call it happiness. Only the noble of heart are called to difficulty. My standpoint is armed neutrality. The only intelligent tactical response to life's horror is to laugh defiantly at it. To be lost in spiritlessness is the most terrible thing of all. What is youth? A dream. What is love? The dream's content. We pretend to be unable to understand life because we know very well that the minute we understand, we are obliged to act accordingly. Whoever has learned to be anxious in the right way has learned the ultimate. It is better to get lost in the passion than to lose the passion. I would rather be a swineherd, understood by the swine, than a poet misunderstood by men. Far from the idleness being the root of all evil, it is rather the only true good. Faith is the highest passion in a man. You become what you understand. Be that self that one is. To be human is not a fact, but a task.